Hey, this is Kutski and you're watching the departmentofdance.com.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayla with the Department of Dance, and I'm here with European hard dance legend Kutski.
Woo!
First question, let's see, you mentioned in the past that you're a fan of smaller venues due to their bigger atmosphere.
Yeah.
Is there any particular show or venue that really stuck with you in the past?
I mean, it's just all the underground ones. I mean, last night was the perfect example of it. I mean, I think, when you've got big festivals, it's like you can pinpoint it and you can say that particular one because it was so big, it was so epic, or the production was amazing. But when it comes to like underground atmospheres, it's like kind of like any club can be that little sweatbox, but it's just that magical like underground vibe that you get. I mean, I suppose if I had to pick one, there was a club in Glasgow called the Arches, got closed down a few years ago, and it was like a club venue that was underneath a bunch of railway arches, and it was like, and the Scottish crowd, if you've ever kind of like heard the reputation of them, it's like they know how to go in hard like that. So you'd go in there and everyone would have their tops off, swinging their t-shirts around their head, screaming and chanting at the top of their voices, and there was like sweat dripping from the roof in there. And it's so if you went in there and you didn't know anything about dance music, you'd be terrified. And it's like, but it was like one of the most friendliest places you could be clubbing wise, and it's like atmosphere there was second to none. And even though I think it just goes to show that there's something magical about that venue, because even though now we run some parties at the O2 Academy, which is like a big concert venue, and they're awesome events, but there's just something about that underground, there's something about a specific venue that's just kind of so like it has its own personality and it brings its own vibe to the party. So yeah, so I'm all about those underground parties.
That's awesome. Is that the Glasgow Club where the infamous "Here We Fucking Go"
That's
came
where
from?
it came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that one definitely has a reputation for being one of the biggest.
Because it's so
party
crazy
venues.
to see it now, because that's been going on since forever, like since way back in the 90s. There was a huge like hardcore event called Resurrection there, and you'd get all the chanting going on there, and so it was just one of them things that it was always just Scotland. You go up to Scotland, here we, and go. It's like kind of like everywhere. And then slowly it started to like spread, and then you'd go to some places in England and it was like, why are they saying that in England? And then you go over to Holland and there'd be a pocket of people saying it. And now it's like you can go anywhere, like Australia, and there's people chanting it. And it's like, yeah, it's not just for hard music. It's like one of my friends, Jordan Suckley, was playing in a trance club in Perth. So it's kind of, and then it's like he sent me a clip of the video, and the whole crowd are chanting "Here we fucking go," and it's like, so it's gone from like underground rave in clubs of Glasgow, and it's like over the space of 15 years, and it's managed to penetrate the worldwide clubbing scene. So you've done well, Glasgow.
Okay, you've said in the past that Hixie and his Bonkers albums is what was one of your main inspirations for getting into the music scene. Now, in 2006, you actually got to be on the 16th album of the Bonkers series. So what was it like for you to be on the album series that inspired you to start in music?
Yeah, I mean, that was like a real big goal for me. It's like, I think the way I like to think of my career, it's kind of like, personal check boxes that I just want to go through, things that I grow up, and it's not necessarily always the biggest things, but sometimes it's like, it's the smallest things that mean the most to you. And it's, I mean, with the Bonkers albums, it's like I was always into rave music when I was growing up, but, in the early 90s, I was too young to be going out clubbing, so I was like just listening to the likes of Prodigy, Alternate, SL2, like that really underground UK vibe. And then it was like around 93, 94, a guy from SL2, which you probably wouldn't know over here, but they were kind of like another Prodigy in the UK. They split and started separate projects. One guy did drum and bass, and the other guy was still doing like the rave sound, but he kind of sped it up and he was faster and it was more happier, which I'd say around 93, 94 was the birth of happy hardcore. And that was all of a sudden, it's like, at that age I was like must have been about 13, 14, something, and then I was kind of like, kind of like, this is, right time, right music for that right age. And then by the time, I think when the Bonkers CDs came out, it would have been like 96, and I was like, kind of like die-hard hardcore fan, and that was the CD that to me, I was kind of like, when I listened to like indie music or something, it's like, I got a guitar and, try to play around with that, try and play it a little bit, and I've had like keyboards in the past, and it's like I had musical, kind of like experience or anything, so it's like I couldn't really do anything, didn't know anything about production at such a young age before the internet and that. And then when that Bonkers CD came out, I was just straight away, I was kind of like, oh, I can be a DJ. I can just find the music that I like and like make my own arrangements of these tracks. And I was like, okay. And then that was like, the moment where I was like, went from like spending me paper and money on computer games to saving up to buy second-hand turntables. So yeah, I'd say it's, I still credit, the time that I listened to that CD for the first time as being a big thing. So then you can obviously imagine, wind on the clock, like, 10 years later on to the CD that I, went down to the shop as a kid and bought with paper and money, that I can now go and look in the shop and see my name on the front of it. It's kind of, crazy.
When you were a young teen, you held an apprenticeship as a civil engineer.
Yes.
If your music career hadn't have taken off, where do you think you would be today?
I don't know, to be honest, because it's one of those things that, like when you hear people say when they have an interview, like, like when they're in a band or something, they had a job when they were earlier and they go, but I always knew that this was my calling. And I always wanted to be a DJ, but I never really thought it was going to happen. So I just got a job which gave me the money to be able to buy all the stuff that I wanted to do to be a DJ, and it was just like a hobby. So I think it was so young when I was at that point, I hadn't really thought that far down the line. I hadn't really kind of like, planned out my life or anything. Didn't have any, grand ambitions of it. So, I wanted to be a DJ, that was the plan, but I didn't really think it was going to happen. So yeah, so it was just one of them things. And then, by the time I'd say I got to like 19, 20, I was playing out quite a lot. And then it's, it kind of dawned on me then, it's like, this could be a career. But I didn't want to quit the job that gave me regular income, because I know how, kind of up and down the dance music industry can be and unpredictable. And, obviously it's like, it's not a cheap hobby. So, if you've got a full-time wage coming in as well. So I juggled both, where I was working down at Radio 1, still had a full-time day job, and was DJing gigs on weekends until I was about 24, I think. And it was the point that that they all kind of came together where I was like, well, I can't do all of them anymore. And I remember speaking to my parents about it, and when you hear people, like their parents are always like encouraging of the traditional career path and the sensible choice, and I was like, I don't know what, something's got to give here, like, and that, and they were like, just sack off the day job and do the DJing thing. They were like, you can get another boring day job anytime. It's like, but you're only going to get one opportunity at this. So it's kind of, it was almost like I was more nervous about quitting the job to chase the dream than my parents, which is kind of like role reversal of what you hear from most people. But at that point I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, handed in my notice, and haven't looked back since.
For someone who is predominantly surrounded by dance music, you've mentioned in the past that you're also a fan of metal. Have you ever used metal or any non-dance genres as inspiration for any of the songs that you've produced?
Yeah, I have, but I don't think it comes through really direct. I mean, sometimes when there's like, styles of music that are quite applicable, where there's elements that will work, but I don't think anybody that goes out to a hardstyle night is necessarily going to appreciate a Dragon Force track in the middle of the set. So there is kind of like a bit of difference there, but I think it's more like, like the elements of music. Like, I mean, it's like I got really obsessed with trap. I know it's kind of like within the hardstyle scene, it's kind of like an evil word now. But when it first came along, it's like I was on tour in America, and it was like nobody knew what it was even out here, and it was just this underground movement when people like Flostradamus and stuff were just kind of kicking off. And somebody was like playing me like, a mixtape, and all I was hearing was like the breakdowns of hardstyle tracks, and then drop into like really shitty production, like with these like weird 808s and like no energy. And I was just kind of like, I couldn't get it out of my mind, where I was just kind of like, I was like, I don't understand what the buzz about this music is. And that's what I almost love most about music, is, like the fascination of finding something new. And like, I was just like, I didn't get it. And then I was just like looking at different stuff, and I was like talking to one of my friends, audio freak, like a hardstyle producer, and we were in the studio, and I was like, man, you need to check there's something going on in America called trap, and basically it's hardstyle tracks with like weird old hip hop drops after it. And then it's like, then we googled it, and it came up with a Mad Decent Block Party, and then everyone's like has their hands in the air with the breakdown, and then when the when the beat dropped and it was just the big bass and stuff, and then it was just all the sound system was about that. And then I was like, okay, the penny dropped then. And then all of a sudden what I was, listening to the music in your bedroom doesn't have the same impact as it does of having it on a block party with a huge sound system. So then there's, kind of, from then it's like, I kind of got obsessed with the music and like, where's it going? And now obviously it's got even a little bit sickly for me, like, it's kind of where it's, with the mainstream influence, because you can tell one person had a hit and then everyone's trying to copy that formula. But, trap in the early days was the same as dubstep in the UK, where it was just kind of like this super raw underground. Every week there was a new track that redefined the genre. And it's like, so I spend a lot of time listening to different styles of music like that, and then just trying to find elements that make them tracks work. Like, what is it that makes it work? And then kind of like dissect it backwards, and then say, right, okay, so that it's doing something that's getting this reaction. Now within what I do, how can I try to maybe take those elements or that idea that hasn't been done in hardstyle before. So not necessarily, you know, as in put a trap break in the track, but, you know, kind of there's like certain things like with trap records, you'll see like, you know, kind of the beat drops, but there's no bass until like the second beat, and it's like a false start, and it catches people, and you always get a big roar from the crowd. So it's like, oh, okay, let's try doing that with hardstyle. So, you know, miss the first beat, coming big on the second, and it's like, oh yeah, and no one had listened to that and go trap, but it was a production trick that they used in trap. So it's like, you know, and then that goes with everything. It's, you know, kind of when you, like with metal, I suppose, which is the, probably from all the music that I listen to, it's like it's the furthest point away from it. But then you listen to stuff like, you know, like the harmonies and stuff that they do in the music, and how, you know, certain things can feel emotional and it can feel really rough and raw in one section, and then when it changes into a chorus, it gets this, you know, euphoria. Why? What is it that they're doing with the music and the chord progression? And then it's like, again, you know, you could like write a hardcore track there that's going to be, you know, completely tear out hard beats. But then it's like when you get to the, you know, the breakdown, you want that hands in the air moment. How does that transition happen? And, you know, there's a lot to be learned in a lot of different styles of music. So I just kind of like always think of myself as like a student of the game. And the more music you listen to, it's, you know, the more lessons you learn.
With your podcast and event brand being aptly named Keeping the Rave Alive, have you noticed any difference in retention of old school quirks in your shows compared to the more mainstream shows? And I'm speaking specifically of, you know, fat pants or candy, glow sticks, any of the traditional rave aspects.
Yeah, I mean, we do kind of see it. Obviously, the rave scene in the US is a lot different than the rave scene in the UK. So it's like, so when you get a throwback to the rave scene in the US, you know, it is talking about, you know, kind of like, you know, the people covered in all the candy and the, you know, the bracelets and kind of, yeah, and then the big pants and stuff. And then, but then the rave scene in the UK, it was more like, you know, kind of, it was just like, you know, like the underground UV paint on the walls type thing. And it's kind of, so yeah, it's interesting to see when you go to different places, like, you know, like I said, America, it doesn't really kind of tend to bring out an old crowd in America. I think because it's like the brand's only 5 years old, which I suppose is, you know, quite a while within it, but it's, you know, the people that were really into the scene when they were like, you know, kind of like maybe 18 and they got into it, you know, so then maybe they've been into the brand for like 5 years now. So, you know, most of our age group now is in America is between like, say, like 18 and 25. It's not like, you know, older, whereas, you know, in the UK, because the rave thing's got, you know, such a longer heritage, you know, right back to the early 90s, you know, we'll see all kinds of people from like, you know, 18-year-olds to like, you know, 40-year-olds coming out with it, where it's like you'd expect the 40-year-olds to be coming out, you know, to kind of relive their youth a little bit, wearing all, you know, kind of like acid smiley t-shirts and stuff, and they're kind of just sitting at the back having a drink now, like, oh, I'm too old to be rolling deep with the kids at the front. So it's, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's interesting to see how it is, because we wanted it to kind of, the idea of the Keeping the Rave Alive concept was more to capture the essence of what the parties were about, because we felt that it's like that things were getting a little bit too lost and a little bit too focused with what they were doing, you know, with the big parties. Everything had to have like a theme and an image, and this was going to be and that was going to, and everything was so like, you know, crafted and unique, and it went into these things, which was great. But we were just kind of like thinking, what happened to just going out and having a party, like, you know, kind of like, and just like not being so, you know, booking really purist lineups where it's like, okay, we're a, like, you know, South Dutch raw event, and all you're going to hear is like, you know, tracks from these 6 record labels all night from beginning to end. And we were just like, yeah, we'll just have like, you know, 3 guests on, like, you know, I'll play a mixture of everything, then we'll have like a hardcore guy, let's book Darren Styles, and then like, you know, kind of let's get like, you know, Techno Boy or something on it, and it's like, you know, hey, we've got a bunch of different DJs that all play different styles, we get some local guys involved that play some different stuff, and then it's different music going throughout the night, which is something that you got back in the day, you know, with the original rave vibe. And it's like none of the, like, you know, some of the big events now, when they edit the festival videos, they look really cool because you just see the drops of everybody going crazy, and then cut to another drop of everyone going crazy, and cut to another drop of everyone going crazy. If you actually just watch the night, there's a lot of people just standing around smoking and stuff, trying to look cool, and when they see the camera there, they're like, whoa. So we just kind of wanted it to not, obviously, you know, our events aren't like festival scale that we do, other than I think we've only got 2 that we like host arenas at, but, you know, even then they're still relatively small compared to the big ones. So again, it was back to that, you know, that underground rave vibe that we wanted to capture with the theme. And it's like, you know, if anyone wants to roll back dressed up in all their candies and their thing, it's more than welcome with us.
So in January, you took a travel vlog in Japan where you went around Akihabara, Tokyo, to different anime stores and arcades. Is there any classic anime or classic arcade game that you really cherished in your past?
To be honest with the whole anime thing, I've never really been into it. It's like when I was younger, it's like, I don't know, it was just like I didn't have any friends that were into it. I mean, I used to watch like stuff like, you know, like Akira and all the like really early stuff like that. that, you know, and it's like, so I got into kind of them, but like the whole like, you know, anime, Dragon Ball Z stuff like, and that, it's like, that was like a whole culture thing that I seem to have missed out on. So it's more like, so when I go over to Japan now, it's like, I like the culture and the imagery, but I'm looking around at it and I'm like, I have no idea who any of these are. But you know, when it comes to like video games, that was something that I was like really into from a young age and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of the stuff, like, you know, like, because my dad was always really into computers as well, because he was in the army and he worked on computers in the army. So when he came out of the army, he was just straight away wanted to buy the first computer that was out. So from when I was like 2 years old, there's like pictures of me like plodding away on like them old ones with little plastic keys. And like when I was like 3 years old, somebody lifted me up when we were on holiday to play on a Pac-Man arcade unit and stuff. So I grew up with a lot of, you know, kind of influences in video games and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, it's all the classics and stuff like that, you know, Pac-Man, Bomberman, you know, all that type of stuff like that, right through to, you know, Street Fighter and all that type of stuff. It's like, there's just something about arcade culture that's really fun. Like, even like when I think to myself, you know, like when you see they re-release the games and you're like, oh, I love that game in the arcade, I can't wait to get it at home. And then you play it once and you're kind of like, it's not the same. And sometimes when I go to arcades, it's like, you know, I could spend time in there and people are like, do you want to play anything? And I'm like, not really. I just kind of like the environment of being in there, just like all the flashing lights and stuff. So yeah, especially like, you know, out in Japan, like there's that arcade culture and all the shops there that you can just, literally, you can just spend all your money there. It's crazy. Yeah, dangerous place to be when you've just been paid.
Thanks to Endymion, you've been given the honorary title of Pussy Motherfucker. Are there any other nicknames or titles that you've been given that we don't know about?
No, that's the only one that seems to have stuck, and yeah, thankfully it's possibly the worst one. I mean, someone was shouting at me like in the club last night, and then some other guy was going, hey man, he played a really good set, and I was like, no, it's not offensive, it's like an in-joke. But yeah, it's like, it was crazy how that came about as well, because like Endymion, obviously they're really big in raw style now, but when they started out, they started in hardcore, and it's like, and I just got to, like, we were at gigs together and I got to know them really well, even though we were quite different scenes. We were just like, because there's 3 guys in Endymion, and I just got, you know, when you just click with somebody and they're just like really cool. And so yeah, we'd done like remix swaps in the early days, you know, and all that, and always stayed in touch. And it was when they'd released, I think it was the first ever hardcore track they put out was called Hardcore Pussy Motherfucker, and it was just this like full-on gabba beat, and then just every now and again like bass from Endymion shouting hardcore, you pussy motherfucker, boom boom boom, and it's like, you know, it's just like that was their first big track and stuff. And it was when I was working at BBC at the time. I'd sent a message around to everyone saying, hey, can you give us some shouts to make jingles for the radio show? And I said, but remember, it's on the BBC, so no swearing. And then, so of course, Bass like sends back like hardcore, you pussy motherfucker. And he was like, Kutski, you pussy motherfucker. And I had all these different variations that I could never use, but I'd kept them. And then further down the line, when we'd did the Keeping the Rave Alive show, which is obviously not BBC, so I'm free to do whatever I want with it. For a joke, because I've been sitting on that for so long, it's kind of like I just used that in a jingle, like on the first show that we did, and people just seem to cotton onto it. And then it's like, and then you get to like gigs and people would be shouting it, and then it's like, yeah, now it's like you can pretty much go anywhere in the world and like somebody will like, you know, be shouting it from the back, or you know, whenever there's like, you know, a breakdown in the track and it goes quiet, you'll see somebody leaning over the barrier going, Kutski, you pussy motherfucker. It's one of those things that it's kind of, it's like, yeah, despite how unnecessarily aggressive it sounds, it's actually quite heartwarming.
That was probably me screaming it last night, if we're going to be entirely honest. Got a couple shots down, and then like every time it went quiet, I'd like run up to the front. Aside from music and video games, are there any other hobbies that you have that we don't know about?
Not really, to be honest. Trying to think. I mean, it's like I do my best to try and, you know, get up and go to the gym in the morning, but that doesn't really happen much in the winter, and that's not because it's a hobby or I'm into it. It's just damage limitation from sitting in the studio all day. So yeah, but I mean, obviously music just takes, you know, a massive amount of time out, and yeah, I mean, it's just like, I mean, usual other boy things, sports, stuff like that. So, you know, I'll tend to watch a bit of sports and stuff, but it's, yeah, I mean, for me it's mainly music that just occupies all the time, because it is that kind of like infinite hobby that it's kind of like, you know, it doesn't matter if you're bored of what you're listening to at the moment, because there's always something else out there, and it's kind of, it's up to you to go and find it. And then once you get into, you know, music production as well, it's kind of, it's not like a job, it's more like once you hear something, you're like, I want to do this, you know, it's like as a hobby for something. I mean, prime example, the other day I was supposed to be writing a review of some software for DJ Magazine, and it was something that helps you start making chords. Like, you give it your root chord and then it tells you all the possible progressions from there. So I thought, oh, this is quite interesting. And then I thought, with another piece of software that you can put acapellas into, and it's kind of, then you can find out what key it's in. So I was just while then thought, oh, just as a slight diversion, it's like I just went on to YouTube and just downloaded the first full a cappella that was on there, which was off Katy Perry E.T. Downloaded it in, put it in. That's in A minor. So I'm like, okay, then threw that into the music sequencer. Put A minor in that new plugin to see what the possible chord progressions from there are, and then you could like put in your own like pattern of notes that you wanted to play on the chords. So it's like, okay, let's put in like an old school, like happy hardcore kind of piano type thing, and then put one into the other. And the next minute, it's like, you know, I've lost like 2 hours and I'm making a bootleg of a Katy Perry record, and it's like I don't have any idea why I'm doing it other than the fact that it's just fun and fascinating. And it's just one of them things that's like I said, you know, there is like, you know, the work side of it that, you know, kind of you have to do, but then there's still just that fun side of it that, you know, that feeds back into that loop. And I tend to find that whenever I'm sitting down and I'm like, right, okay, it's time for a big track now, we need to have a big release, you know, sit down and write something. It's like, you know, it'll come and it'll go, but then it's like I'll do something silly for a bit of fun, and then that's the one that everybody jumps onto. So I try not to rein myself in too much with what I do, and just try and have fun, so try and, you know, keep the job as much a hobby as possible.
In a recent interview that I found online, you mentioned that you were really looking forward to playing Persona 5. Did you get a chance to play it yet?
I played about like 15 hours of it, which to most people is kind of like, they're going to be like, wow, you know, kind of you put your time into that game. It's like I barely scratched the surface on it, if I'm honest. But yeah, it's one of those games that it's been at the top of my pile where I'm like, I'm going to come back to it, I'm going to come back to it, I'm going to come back to it. And then I lent it to my girlfriend, and she's played it right through and finished it while I've been away, like, and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of like it was on the top of my list. But somebody actually brought me a book last night full of the artwork from Persona 5. Like a full, like, you know, hardback book with like, yeah, like the design works of it and stuff. And then that was like the motivation that I think that I needed to get me back into it, because Persona 4, before, like, for anyone that doesn't know, it's like Persona games are like these crazy Japanese RPGs where it starts off with some like school kids that are in a gang, and then it just goes like crazy supernatural stuff. And I never thought I'd be into anything like that. And one of my friends bought it for the PlayStation Vita, like the portable, and he was like, I don't know what the hell this is. He was like, do you want it? And I was like, yeah, cool, I'll play it when I'm travelling. And I had like a 11-hour flight to Canada and nothing else to do, so I was just like, okay, see what this is. And by the end of the flight, I was like, I need to know what happens next, and I completely fell in love with the franchise from there. So yeah, it's like I'd played that through twice. I think the save file on that was like 150 hours I'd put into it, and I was waiting for like a year going, I'm going to play Persona, I can't wait for Persona 5 to come out. And then when it finally came out, I've just been travelling all the time and I've had no opportunity to play it yet. So, but it's very much on the top of my like pile of shame when it comes to gaming.
So, last question, what do you know about Houston, Texas?
Derek Lewis. Do you know Derek Lewis? He's your hero from here. He's an MMA fighter in the UFC, and it's like he's a really funny guy. Whenever he does the interviews, I was like always a big fan of him, but then when I saw when the floods had happened recently, I was like looking on his social media, and instead of you know, kind of like, you know, being the usual celebrity, you know, out in bars drinking and stuff, he was just driving around in his big truck pulling people out their houses and just going around like saving everyone. I was like, not only is this guy an absolute killer of an athlete, he's really funny, he's amazing at what he does, and he's just a genuine, amazing, down-to-earth guy. So whenever I think of Houston now, I always think of Derek Lewis.